This is exciting.
And they don't wait for secondary and tertiary mark.
For 60 years, people asked the same question. What really happened between Simon and Garfunkel? The public answers never told the full story. But in late 2024, something unexpected brought them face to face after years of silence. It involved Paul's ex-wife, an apartment building in New York, and a lunch neither man planned. When they finally talked, Paul said something that made Art break down completely. He told Art he always felt Art wanted to hurt him. What Art said next shocked everyone in the room. The truth went back further than anyone knew. Art Garfunkel entered the world on November 5th, 1941, in Forest Hills, Queens. And from the beginning, there was a warm closeness around him because his family carried deep roots that stretched back to Romania. His grandparents had arrived in America at the start of the 20th century and slowly worked their way from Manhattan to the quieter streets of Queens, where Art grew up in a semi-detached red brick home at 13658 72nd Avenue. Inside that house lived his mother, Rose, who stayed home with the children, and his father, Jack, who traveled often as a salesman and carried a past life as an actor that quietly stirred Art's early love for performing. Art stood between two brothers, with Jules older and Jerome younger, and the family's strong Jewish traditions filled the home with a steady sense of belonging. Even though Jack spent many days on the road, the small moments when he was home always left traces on Art, especially when music filled the living room and the children were encouraged to listen closely and sing along, which helped shape him before he even understood what was happening. That gentle beginning shifted when Jack placed a wire recorder in Art's hands at just 4 years old. It was a strange and magical machine for a child, and something in him lit up as soon as he heard his own voice coming back to him. He spent afternoon after afternoon singing into the microphone, recording, rewinding, and listening again, trying to understand every tiny mistake in pitch and pronunciation. Those hours grew into an obsession, especially once his father began filling the basement with early home recording gear. Soon the space became a little vocal laboratory, where Art and his brothers gathered after school, huddling around the microphone and learning how to shape a word, how to control breath, and how to create a sound so clean that it felt polished, even before they knew anything about professional music. Art later said that this was what pulled him into music more than anything else, because in those moments he wasn't just singing, he was studying himself, which helped build the sharp ear that would later define his voice. As he grew older, the neighborhood around him became just as important. Kew Gardens Hills had quiet sidewalks, neat gardens, and a calmness that gave Art the space to let music settle in his mind. His house sat just 3 blocks away from Paul Simon's home, although neither of them knew yet how much that one detail would matter. Art walked the same streets every morning to PS 164, then to Parsons Junior High, and later to Forest Hills High School. And along the way, he found his voice in school choirs, plays, and talent shows. The routines of Queens shaped him as much as the recording sessions did, and somewhere in those early school days, he crossed paths with Paul Simon, another kid who cared about music as deeply as he did. Their first real moment together came in the summer of 1953 during rehearsals for a 6th grade production of Alice in Wonderland at PS 164. Paul noticed Art right away because Art was tall, confident, and carried a voice that seemed smoother than anyone else's. They were cast as the White Rabbit and the Cheshire Cat, and while they rehearsed their parts, they began harmonizing playfully, discovering how naturally their voices fit together. By the end of the year, they had created a street corner group called the Peptones and spent afternoons singing with friends, trying to copy the harmonies they heard on the radio, and slowly building the bond that would carry them far into the future. During the years that followed, their dedication became something different from the hobbies of other teenagers. After school, they rehearsed for hours, studying the Everly Brothers and trying to match their harmonies with the same flawless blend. In 1956, they wrote their first original song, "The Girl for Me," and were serious enough about it that Paul's father registered it with the Library of Congress to protect it. Those early years were filled with a mix of excitement and quiet discipline, and something about their shared focus made them feel set apart, as if they were preparing themselves for a path that would eventually open. But even in something that strong, small moments could leave long shadows. One day, Paul's mother told him that he had a good voice, but Arthur had a fine voice. The words were simple, but they sank deep. Paul carried them for years, and slowly they planted a feeling of competition inside him, something he never fully shook. Even while they were creating something beautiful together, that quiet wound shaped how he saw himself next to Art, and sooner or later it would create tension that neither of them knew how to escape. Still, music kept pulling them forward. In the summer of 1957, they tried to remember an Everly Brothers song they had heard, but since neither could recall the lyrics, they tried to rebuild it from memory. Instead of recreating the original, they ended up writing a new song of their own called "Hey Schoolgirl." They recorded a demo at a small studio in New York, and while they waited, a record executive overheard it and immediately signed them to big records. They released the song under the names Tom and Jerry, with Art calling himself Tom Graff and Paul calling himself Jerry Landis. The single sold 150,000 copies and climbed to number 49 on the Billboard chart, which was astonishing for two boys who were still in high school. When they later heard the real Everly Brothers song, they realized they had never copied it at all. They had stumbled into something original without even trying. That early success brought them to American Bandstand on November 22, 1957. They appeared on national television as teenagers and performed "Hey Schoolgirl," sitting down afterward with Dick Clark for a short interview. Their classmates watched, their teachers talked about it, and for a brief moment they felt what it was like to be rising stars. But beneath that excitement, a quiet shift was already forming. During the same period, Paul began recording solo songs under the name Jerry Landis without telling Art. He recorded more than 30 tracks on his own and even produced music for other artists. When Art found out, he felt hurt in a way he couldn't fully express. Paul had been his closest friend, and Art believed friendship meant honesty, so discovering that Paul had gone ahead without him felt like a small betrayal. It caused their first split and left a mark that would follow them for years, even when they reunited later and created Simon and Garfunkel. Art Garfunkel stepped back into music with Paul Simon in 1964, and it felt like something that had been waiting to happen for years. They had gone their separate ways when they were young, Simon in England trying to make it alone, and Garfunkel buried in college life. Yet a simple phone call from promoter Sid Delsener pulled them back together. He had seen something in them that he couldn't forget. So by July 1964, Garfunkel was in New York again, standing beside Simon in a small room at Columbia Records as they performed 3 songs for producer Tom Wilson. One of those songs was "The Sound of Silence." Wilson didn't hesitate. He signed them right there, putting an end to their old pseudonyms and giving them a clean start as Simon and Garfunkel. Their debut album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., came out in October 1964. It barely sold a few thousand copies and quietly slipped away, which pushed the two to part again. Even then, something in the air was shifting. Folk music was rising. People were looking for new voices, and almost without warning, radio stations started playing "The Sound of Silence." The stage for something bigger was already being built. While the song slowly found its way onto playlists across the country, Tom Wilson made a bold move that changed everything. In late 1965, he took the original acoustic version of "The Sound of Silence" and added electric guitars and drums. It happened without Simon and Garfunkel knowing anything about it. Studio musicians played along to their track, turning a gentle folk song into something sharper and louder. The new version came out in September 1965. By the first day of 1966, it was sitting at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it stayed for 14 weeks. Paul Simon was living in England then and was stunned when the remixed version reached him by mail. He thought it sounded strange and messy. The world disagreed. People connected to it instantly. The success pulled Simon back to New York within days, and soon the duo were rushing to create a follow-up album. That album became Sounds of Silence. When Simon returned, everything started moving faster. Their new album came out in January 1966, carried by the momentum of their unexpected hit. Then came Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Time in 1966, and Bookends in 1968. Each new project carried more weight, but their biggest leap arrived in 1967 when director Mike Nichols used their songs for the film The Graduate. Mrs. Robinson turned into a cultural wave. Their music filled theaters, radios, bedrooms, and dorm rooms. For many, they became the soundtrack of a generation trying to understand itself. Yet while their fame was rising, something inside the partnership was cracking. In 1969, they began recording Bridge Over Troubled Water, and the process quickly fell apart. Garfunkel spent most of the year in Mexico filming Catch-22. The plan was for him to be gone for only 6 weeks, but filming dragged on for months. Meanwhile, Simon stayed in Los Angeles writing, arranging, and producing almost everything alone. He later said the partnership felt uneven because he felt he was carrying all the creative work, while Garfunkel arrived only to sing. Garfunkel admitted later that the sessions were toxic. Months stretched on. Their time together became shorter and shorter. Simon even recorded parts alone without Garfunkel present. The famous echo on Garfunkel's vocals came from hours of trial and error using a Sony reel-to-reel tape deck. The work was beautiful, but the space between them was growing faster than the music they were making. Even with all the strain, Bridge Over Troubled Water became a force. The title track rose to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 6 weeks. In 1970, its reach stretched across the world. It was recorded with 16-track technology, layers of harmonies, and drums that were played in an elevator shaft to create a deep echo. Aretha Franklin performed the song at the 1971 Grammy Awards only days after Simon and Garfunkel collected their own awards for it. It felt like a celebration of something powerful, yet behind the scenes, the moment was painful. The partnership had already fallen apart. At the 13th Annual Grammy Awards in 1971, the song won Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Contemporary Song, Best Arrangement, and Best Engineered Recording, while the album itself won Album of the Year. It should have been their brightest moment. Instead, the applause landed in strange places. When people stood up for Garfunkel's voice, Simon felt something sharp inside. He thought quietly to himself that he had written the song. His mother once told him that Arthur had a fine voice, a comment that seemed small until it carved into his confidence. Their tension was so clear that Simon later said the partnership felt finished to him, even while they stood on stage accepting their trophy. As the applause faded, jealousy began to shape their final chapter. Simon believed he was the one building their music from the ground up, writing every word and guiding every session, while Garfunkel received the louder praise for singing. Garfunkel's voice won crowds instantly. Simon's thoughts often drifted back to his own work and how the credit seemed to slip away. He once said that Garfunkel had been his first real close friend, someone who understood him, and that losing him as both a partner and a friend felt like watching something precious disappear. Their album sold more than 25 million copies, and that success only deepened the irony. Together, they were unstoppable. Apart, they were broken by everything that had made them brilliant. By the time the album reached listeners, the partnership was already gone. One of the biggest sources of pain came from Garfunkel's decision to act in films without telling Simon. After the long absence during Catch-22, Garfunkel signed on for a role in Carnal Knowledge. He didn't tell Simon until after the album was finished. Simon remembered asking him why he didn't didn't mention it, and Garfunkel replied that he thought Simon wouldn't finish the album if he knew. Simon felt dismissed, like he was expected to write and wait, while Garfunkel followed other dreams. That moment became the final break. The story deepened when people learned that Simon had written The Only Living Boy in New York about Garfunkel's long absence during Catch-22. He poured the loneliness and the sense of being left behind into the song. It was a quiet confession of how deeply he felt the separation. By June 1970, when Catch-22 finally arrived in theaters, Simon had made his decision. He went to Columbia Records president Clive Davis and told him the partnership was finished. Davis tried to warn him that splitting up would be the biggest mistake of his life. Simon felt there was nothing left to fix. He didn't want to fight. He only wanted to move on. Davis later admitted that the breakup took a terrible toll on both Simon and Garfunkel. Together, they had created something timeless, but ambition, silence, hurt feelings, and uneven roles had pushed them too far apart. Art Garfunkel married Linda Marie Grossman in Nashville on October 1st, 1972, and Paul Simon stood there watching his partner step into a life Art already sensed might not fit him. Later, he admitted he didn't love Linda and didn't even like her much. And when he spoke about that period, he used words like turbulent and bitter because nothing about the marriage felt steady. It lasted only 3 years, ending in 1975, and by then he felt drained in ways he didn't know how to explain. He was blunt about all of it, telling fans that the marriage had more to do with convenience than affection, and that level of honesty from a star made people pause because it opened a window into a part of his life he usually kept hidden. That failed marriage pushed him into a difficult stretch, and it set the tone for what came next. Not long after, in March 1974, Art crossed paths with Laurie Bird, and their connection grew quickly into something deep and fragile at the same time. Laurie was an actress and photographer with a gentle face and a quiet sadness behind her eyes. She even appeared in Paul Simon's film Annie Hall in 1977 as Simon's on-screen girlfriend. Their relationship stretched from 1974 to June 1979, and during those years, it moved through passion, confusion, affection, and hurt all at once. Laurie battled depression and carried the weight of her mother's suicide at age 26, a tragedy she later mirrored when she took her own life at the exact same age. In June 1979, she died from a Valium overdose in the New York apartment she shared with Art. He called her beautiful in a lonesome, haunted way, and he believed he wasn't ready for marriage. Something he feared had added to her heartbreak. Her death pulled him into the darkest time of his life, and he later said that nothing before or after ever hit him as hard as losing her. By 1980, Art found himself standing on a film set for Nicholas Roeg's psychological thriller, Bad Timing, and life took a strange turn because the story he was acting out felt too close to the one he was living. He played a psychiatrist trapped in a toxic relationship, and the role began to mirror the grief, guilt, and confusion he carried from Laurie's passing. Roeg saw it too and said Art understood he was basically playing himself. Art was filming in Europe when Laurie died in the apartment they shared, and acting through a story full of emotional chaos and suicide placed him face to face with the wounds he was trying to escape. Bad Timing became more than a film for him. It became a reflection of everything he wished he could undo. Even with all the turmoil, Art kept moving. In 1975, just as he was trying to find footing again, his solo album, Breakaway, became his biggest success. It sold over 1 million copies, went platinum in the United States, and climbed to number 7 on the Billboard 200. It stayed on the charts for months and carried 3 top 40 singles. I Only Have Eyes for You reached number 18 in the US and number 1 in the UK. Breakaway reached number 39. My Little Town one reached number 9. That last one had a special spark because Paul Simon wrote it for Art and slipped back into the studio with him, even though they were still carrying old tensions. Breakaway proved Art could stand on his own, while also reminding everyone how much they missed the magic of the duo. Paul had written My Little Town because he felt Art's solo work needed more bite, more edge, more of the grit their partnership had always carried. Their reunion on that single in 1975 surprised fans, and when it climbed the charts, it felt like a brief reminder of what they once were. They even performed it together on Saturday Night Live, and for a moment, the world believed they might return as a team. But the moment passed. They never recorded another original song together again. My Little Town became a bittersweet echo of a partnership that could have gone further if resentment hadn't lived between them. Then came September 19th, 1981, and everything shifted again. Their free concert in Central Park brought them back together in front of an estimated 500,000 people, the largest crowd the park had ever seen. Organizers expected 300,000, but people kept flowing in until the entire field was a sea of faces. The concert raised $51,000 for park restoration and aired on television, introducing their music to a whole new generation. On stage, the magic returned instantly, and for a moment, it looked like the past had healed. But behind the stage, things were different. Reports described arguments, tension, even pushing. They fought during the album sessions that followed. Simon called the recording process torturous. By the early 1990s, during another set of shows in New York, the same wounds ripped open. The reunion felt triumphant in public and fractured in private, and their friendship stayed fragile. Years later, Art faced a different kind of battle when his voice, the thing that shaped his entire identity, suddenly disappeared. In 2010, doctors diagnosed him with vocal cord paresis, a rare condition that caused partial paralysis in one of his vocal cords. It arrived right when he and Paul were preparing for a North American reunion tour. The tour was canceled, and Art felt crushed by regret. For months, he could barely sing or even talk. Doctors suspected years of smoking had irritated his vocal cords, but no one could find a clear cause. From 2010 to 2014, he fought to regain what had defined him since childhood. In 2012, he tried returning to the stage, but canceled 7 out of his last 8 shows. His confidence fell apart. Losing his voice felt like losing his sense of self, but he kept trying. In 2013, he performed small shows, treating each one like a step toward healing. By the end of that year, he had completed 49 shows. In January 2014, he finally announced that his voice was back. He admitted singing was still harder than before, but each performance felt like a victory. His resilience turned the struggle into a comeback story that showed how even the strongest voices can be tested. Then came 2015, and old wounds returned to the surface when Art called Paul an idiot and a jerk in a Daily Telegraph interview. He questioned how Paul could walk away from their partnership at the height of fame, and the comments shook fans. He later admitted he was a fool for saying those things and knew his words had cut Paul deeply. A year later, Paul made it clear the fracture was real when he told reporters in 2016 that they didn't even talk. He said their relationship was strained and distant, and he seemed ready to move forward without expecting anything to change. Years passed in silence while fans wondered if they would ever speak again. But life has a way of folding people back into each other's paths. In late 2024, Paul Simon's ex-wife, Peggy Simon, moved into the same building where Art Garfunkel lived in New York City. It was pure chance, and yet it changed everything. Paul's son, Harper, arranged a lunch between the two men. They hadn't sat together in years, and when they finally looked at each other again, something inside both of them softened. They began talking about the pain, the pride, the hurt, the misunderstandings. Paul told Art that he always felt Art wanted to hurt him in those interviews. Art broke down the moment he heard those words. He said he had wanted to shake up their clean image, to sound bold, maybe even rebellious, but he never meant to wound Paul in ways that left scars. Emotion took over. Tears appeared. Then they hugged. Both men, now in their 80s, admitted they had always loved each other, and both felt the weight of years years wasted in silence. By December 2024, Art shared with People magazine that they had reunited for the first time in years after a long period of estrangement. He said he wanted forgiveness before it was too late. He felt tears roll down his face when he thought about that lunch. He remembered Paul's hug and the comfort of returning to something familiar. They didn't promise new music. They didn't need to. What mattered was the healing. Art's son even suggested they might collaborate someday. But for now, their focus was something more important than a song. They were choosing peace. They were choosing to close a long and painful chapter. And after everything they had lived through, that quiet choice felt like the real reunion the world had been waiting for.